Before entering the Jewish professional world, I worked as a labor organizer for the building trades unions. I counted among my colleagues and friends construction workers from all different fields: electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, carpenters. I was always envious of their practical skills and spatial reasoning. And more than once, I traded homemade cookies for repair work around my apartment. I don't think that's in the union rates, but unfortunately, the inability to wrap my mind around a blueprint has followed me into this field as well. Throughout the Tanakh, we encounter sections related to construction. Many verses outline the building materials and measurements required to create sacred structures. We read such instructions for the very first time in this week's Parsha, which provides the guidelines for Noah's Ark. This year, rather than letting my eyes glaze over at the first mention of gopher wood or cubits, I found myself stuck on a detail of the ark's design. God instructs Noah to make an ark, to cover it with pitch, to build it 300 cubits long, 50 wide, and 30 high, and then God adds, "Tzohar ta'aseh lateva," make an opening for daylight in the ark, and terminate it within a cubit of the top. Impossibly dark and heavy clouds were gathering. A torrential rain, unlike anything the world had ever seen, was about to fall, and God tells Noah to make a skylight? This was an unexpected and confusing instruction. Contemplating this verse, it initially seemed hopeful. In the middle of laying out a disturbing and destructive plan, God promises that the sun will shine again. Daylight will become visible through that opening. But upon further consideration, this verse may be less about hope and more about offering an important critique. The architecture of this vessel reflects and reveals Noah's fundamental flaw. We are told, Noach ish tzaddik. Noah was a tzaddik, a righteous and just person, unique among his generation. While others were sinful, Noah was lawful. He directed his energy and attention toward the same place the window in the ark was located, toward the heavens. With eyes fixed ever upward, Noah blinded himself to the fate of those around him. So complete was Noah's commitment to justice that he did not argue against the deadly punishment of countless people and animals. So total was his righteousness that he did not try to gather his wayward neighbors into the safety of the ship. So sure was his judgment that he did not try to teach them a better path or show faith in their capacity to change. Like the ark he built, Noah had no windows into anyone else's life but his own, and he stayed in that closed-off place. Noah demonstrates what masters of Musar, Jewish ethical and spiritual development, know to be true. Every characteristic can become detrimental if taken to the extreme. Ideally, we seek to balance each trait with its opposite, and thereby, on average, to walk a middle path. Noah, and God for that matter, needed to temper their tzedek, justice and righteousness, with rachamim, compassion for others. You and I are not likely to encounter a scene quite as dramatic as the one that unfolded in our parsha. But the appeal and the destructiveness of unmitigated tzedek remains present today. We are part of a culture filled to the brim with righteousness that has in fact turned into self-righteousness. We see it play out in politics. The gap between our two main political parties has widened considerably, and it is increasingly difficult to talk to people with whom we disagree. Each side views the other as sanctimonious and out of touch. There are genuine threats to our safety and democracy, and my call for greater compassion is not an invitation to paper over meaningful differences. But productive disagreements have turned into dangerous divides, in part because we have stopped seeing other people's perspectives and concerns. The same pattern is exacerbated by both cable TV and social media. According to a recent NYU study, while social media companies may not seek to intensify polarization, content that elicits partisan fear or indignation is particularly contagious and helps fuel their advertising business model. But you likely knew this on some level, even without a study. We feel giddy when we post that perfect, stinging comeback. And we know the social capital that accumulates when we air grievances or point out hypocrisy. These platforms don't reward doubt or nuance, so it becomes easy to shut others out until we dismiss them entirely. And all of this becomes deeply hurtful when it enters our personal lives, when self-righteousness frays the bonds between us. Sometimes we are the ones being judged, finding that a belief we hold or a piece of our identity is derided by another. As a result, it no longer feels comfortable getting coffee with a friend or safe returning home for Thanksgiving with a family member. But other times, we are the ones passing judgment, so sure that our perspective is objectively right that we stop respecting the subjectivity of another. Connections with our loved ones allow us a window into their lives, but self-righteousness fogs up the glass until we can't see them clearly anymore. There are times when a sense of outrage is warranted, when a commitment to being right and strictly just is admirable. But to exclusively rely on those feelings is to miss a key lesson of our Torah portion. Righteousness alone will flood us as individuals and drown us as a society. We need compassion as well. Noah may have survived the deluge by looking up to that top opening, directing his attention only to the heavens beyond, but as soon as he left the ship, he became overwhelmed by the fate of all that had surrounded him on earth. God may have shined down just one slim spotlight at first, illuminating only the hold of that vessel. But God subsequently promised never to bring about such destruction again, and to symbolize that promise, relied on a rainbow, a broad arc of light. We need to pick up where the story leaves off, to learn from past missteps and choose breadth over narrowness, engagement over disconnection. We do this when we look beyond ourselves and try to comprehend the circumstances and struggles of our neighbors. We can face today's challenges and find a haven amidst the gathering clouds by constructing our arks not with one window, limala, at the top, but with many openings, misaviv, all around, that allow us to see and welcome in others. Shabbat Shalom.